Welcome back to another episode of Durango and Pod's RV house hacking adventure. I'm Craig. They call me Durango.
And I'm Talitha. He calls me Pod. In this episode, we're going to talk about using VRBO and Airbnb for house hacking versus Craigslist. And this topic is due to a comment on one of our previous videos by a watcher named Justin. So shout out to you, Justin. Thanks.
Yeah, so we're going to break down why we like Airbnb or VRBO over Craigslist. We'll kind of spell it out step by step why we chose to do what we did. So one of the first things that we like about Airbnb and VRBO versus Craigslist is your renters are actually reviewed. In fact, our advice is if you have somebody that wants to stay in your place under Airbnb or VRBO and they don't have some kind of rating from a previous stay, we choose not to rent to them. That's how important that is. Everyone that's stayed in our properties that had a 5-star rating has lived up to that. In fact, this is anecdotal because it happened to us, but a true story. A renter left our property, got a hold of me in a near panic on the phone and said, "Hey, Craig, I wanted to apologize. I think I left some crumbs on your couch."
Right.
And now our maid had just given me a call, person who had cleaning our place, and said, "Man, this last guy was the cleanest that's ever been in there." So that'll give you an example of the concern they have about retaining a 5-star rating. And then you have to work hard as well to retain a 5-star rating. Now, I don't know if that would be considered that hard necessarily. Keep the place clean. Make sure you have good communication with your clients and so on. So it's not like it's difficult to maintain it. You just have to be aware that how your property looks and so on will affect your rating as well as somebody that is renting that property out.
Right, because Craigslist doesn't have any kind of vetting of the people who are going to be contacting you as potential renters, whereas the short-term services will have that, and you have the opportunity to review them. And
through Craigslist, you're often not going to have a short-term stay.
Right.
You're probably looking at a more long-term rental, I would think, through Craigslist. Now, you could do a full background check. They're about $35, I guess. Or a subscription site where you could check on these kind of people at some kind of expense. Again, we liked Airbnb and VRBO for the reasons that they were doing the screening, or you could get a good idea of your client before they arrived.
And again, as Craig just mentioned, Craigslist has mostly the longer term renters, and so the rates there are reflective of that, where it's more the standard long-term month-to-month rates.
Right, your regular market rates for rent.
Where we are looking for higher cash flow through the short-term rental sites that provide a higher rate opportunity. And we really saw that where we were getting 2 to 2.5 times the standard monthly rate. So you can realize a much higher cash flow with the short-term rental services.
Yeah, so if you want a number behind this, we anticipated on long-term rent about a $13 to $13.50 rent for long-term rent. We realized $2,000 to $2,400 through Airbnb in rent. So substantial difference. Now back out energy costs and so on, but our house was upgraded with Mitsubishi mini splits, and it's a reasonably affordable house to heat and cool throughout the year. So our expenses were known and relatively static, with the exception of one guest who stayed from Texas, who really wasn't satisfied unless the house was about 102 degrees inside. But anyway, really nice nurse, just used to a Texas market.
Yes. And also with short-term renters, you are less likely to have protections through VRBO. It's also HomeAway, managed under the umbrella of Expedia and Airbnb.
Yeah. So, and there's actually things that a person can purchase that help you monitor your property to make sure that that things are going well. To stop parties and that kind of thing. But we had a 1-bedroom, 1-bath house. This was not a convenient party location for a bunch of people to begin with.
Right.
But anyway, there are systems that, and you can ask questions about that, and we'll respond to those about what you can do to help protect yourself. A lot of it is that, unlike a standard rental contract for long-term rent, you can anticipate you're going to be paid by Airbnb and VRBO.
Yep.
You're not going to have somebody that can say, well, I just can't pay for the next 6 months.
Right.
So that is absolutely handy. It's direct deposited.
Right. And we've seen scam artists on Craigslist. You can't really vet people on Craigslist. We actually experienced this with our rental, where we had a person staying and somebody knocked on the door and said, hey, I'm here because I paid you through Craigslist $1,000.
He was saying this to our guest.
Yeah, the guest called us and said, somebody said they rented the house. We said, no, you have rented the house. Please tell them to go away. And they gave this person our name and number, and we actually never heard from them because we had not talked to this person. We went on Craigslist and found out somebody had copied our information off of the short-term rental sites and put it on Craigslist illegally. So we reported that to Craigslist and it was taken down. So you do actually have to monitor Craigslist for fraudulent postings sometimes.
Yeah. And again, with Airbnb and VRBO, there are some built-in protections. So what we found is that there's plenty of people that want to themselves rent from you and save a buck and try to circumvent Airbnb, VRBO, or whatever.
Right.
We wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
It's just a better thing to use the rules and guidelines of Airbnb as protection than to risk it.
Right. And they seem to have gone through all of the legal hoops that we don't have any interest in spending the time managing all of those contract language, dealing with all that. The address is hidden until somebody actually signs a contract online. They give you boilerplate contract language. You're not meeting somebody to exchange money directly like you would on Craigslist. The short-term rental contracts handle that for you. You can just work with one or the other. They also deal with the taxes with local municipalities. Find out what the rules are in your district. In our area, if it's a stay less than 30 days, you have to collect those short-term rental taxes. We don't want to deal with collecting that and submitting it to the city.
Right.
And so Airbnb, VRBO takes care of that for us, which is really nice. And we don't have to deal with refunds or cancellations. Again, they handle that. Craigslist doesn't have that kind of service.
Right.
And extensions have also been really easy. There have been people who have something change and they'd like to extend, or we have the option to extend. Somebody who actually also was a full-time RV person, needed a place to stay while their RV was being serviced, rented our home, and the RV service took a little longer than they expected. They asked to extend, and we were able to just do that right on the website. That service is easier to do on the desktop. They have the mobile service as well. Some of those applications are easier on the desktop than the mobile.
One of the things I do like about the Airbnb and VRBO processes, if you want a completely simple system, you can just sign up with one or the other.
Right.
So, in other words, they can do what's called an instant book. You can kind of, maybe when you're done looking at this, you can look at some more details about how this stuff works if you have an interest in that. But this would mean that you would have very little interaction whatsoever with your clients that are coming in to move in. They would just pick your place, instantly book it. You're going to get paid. It's all done, right? Now we chose to, so that's a pro. You can, that way you'll have less hassle personally, get your place booked. That it would be in the pro category. Now the con to that is, if you're only on one platform, let's say you just chose Airbnb, those are the only clientele that are going to be looking at your property. Right now, strangely enough, people are kind of loyal to one or the other for whatever reason. We chose to be on both platforms, but that means people can't instant book.
Right.
So, but let's break that down. That meant approximately 2 hours of our time in a given month. So we're not talking about a huge time sink because you're on two calendars. All that means is that you have to manage those calendars. If people book on Airbnb, you need to immediately get over and block out those days on the other platform so you don't get double booked. That could be a problem because that would start affecting your reputation, your standing with these internet companies and so on. So it's a little bit more work, but it's not a crazy amount of extra work, right? It's a couple of hours a month. So
yeah, and we also actually liked not doing the instant booking because it gives you 24 hours to review the inquiry for your property, because you can then review those review the reviews. Look and see what people have written about those renters. How many times have they stayed at past properties? Did they leave the property clean? We experienced most of the time that people do leave properties very clean, and it was very quick to just wash things up and vacuum and reset within a couple hours.
in fact, our experience is the only time we've even, and I wouldn't even call it a drastic problem, but the only time we've had any kind of problem with that, the person didn't have a 5-star review, they had a 4-star and we went with it.
Yeah.
So if they have no review, we're not going to rent to you.
Right.
If you don't have a 5-star review, we're probably not going to rent to you.
Right. So, yeah, if you don't rent to somebody, the site will block those dates. But then we have the other website to book through if you really feel uncomfortable. That's a plus to having two platforms. So read through all that fine print. If you're looking at doing the short-term rental process, find out all those rules. So there's less visibility if you're on just one platform, but you can have more control. So again, with the short-term rental versus Craigslist, you have more legal protections, and there are some insurance options. They can get short-term insurance, and if they break something, it can get replaced. You just file a claim, which is nice. There's actually like a big liability blanket as well as a homeowner that these short-term companies provide for you, which I've never read anything about Craigslist doing that. Honestly, we never even considered doing this through Craigslist because
once we decided not to be on a long-term rent situation and to go with Airbnb and VRBO, that's what we just chose to do, all in.
Yep.
And we had lots of people try to circumvent that. Typically for their own savings, there's expenses, but it really never steered us wrong to say no. And the funny thing about when you're starting with this is you're going to feel like this place is never going to rent, it's never going to rent, and then bam, it rents. Yeah. So my best advice is give this a shot and then relax a little bit about the process, because it really has been rewarding for us. And particularly if you're in the Northwest here along the I-5 corridor in near any of these major cities, really good Airbnb, VRBO, short-term rental market.
And if you don't have a garage like we do behind the house for your belongings, you can even do custom rules. We actually had a really small room that wasn't usable for much, so we put some of our extra stuff in that and just put a padlock on it and told people there is a room that you won't have access to, and we put some of our
Electronics.
electronics and some of the items that we're going to need to be replenished in the house, toilet paper and things like that for storage, usually the storage inside the house. So you can think outside the box, see how to make the house work for you in this situation.
So I think one of the top 3 benefits, perhaps, to using Airbnb VRBO is their marketing.
Mm-hmm.
They're out there getting your property advertised because it's in their interest to get it booked. It's also in your interest to get it booked.
Yeah.
So they have a marketing team that I can tell you right now we couldn't have equaled their marketing skills and reach. So probably one of the top reasons to think about using Airbnb and VRBO is their marketing. You can even get additional services that they offer to help you market the place. There's a fee for some of these things. Here, Talitha can tell you about some of those services.
Right. They do offer professional photos if you don't feel like your photography skills are up to par, and you can post a video of your property on there, and they'll even give you a custom website which you can name your property. They always recommend naming your home. So there's both desktop and mobile apps, as I mentioned earlier. So you'll get familiar with those, and there are people to call as well if you have problems. Lots of FAQs, good way to book your calendar so you don't have to manage that. There's also other apps out there that you can research, but we didn't find a need to use those. The apps that are provided by VRBO and Airbnb worked well. For the mobile app, I could book and manage things and communicate really well directly with our renters.
And we forecast our stay rate at 25 days out of the month. Is how we calculated what our cash flow would be. And we often, nearly all the time, exceeded the 25-day thing anyway. We had a lot of long-term stays. But it's a good way to calculate. If you're looking at your property and you want to compare it into the market, look at it based on about 25 days of occupancy to be safe, and whatever rate you think you're going to get compared to your market. And that's the size of the house, how many bedrooms, how many guests we're allowed to stay. We did all of our research based on a 1-bedroom, 1-bath house.
And of course, you want to also, in pricing your home, know about the fees that you're going to have to pay as a renter. Of course, these services don't do this out of the goodness of their heart. You can get onto the platform for free. You can build your posting with them at no cost, which is pretty amazing, to get your description, post your photos, and they'll let you take as long as you want. Actually, I was a little worried about starting it because we weren't quite sure if we were ready yet, but you can start building it and put it on hold, and then when your house is actually ready, then publish your rental when your calendar is actually going to be available. But you don't pay anything until you have a renter. You pay out of the proceeds. So essentially your renter is paying the fees. And fees can vary depending on the structure you agree to. So on Airbnb, the most common fee structure is 3% that a homeowner pays, and then renters pay too. There are some other fee structures with Airbnb, and things change. So again, please read the contract that you sign if you go into this and see what the fees are at the time you sign up. VRBO's fees were a little higher when we signed in. It's 5% plus 3% for credit card fees. So we were like, well, their fees are higher. We're just going to tack on a few dollars extra per day.
Yep.
So if we were charging,
pass it on.
Yep, $100 per night at Airbnb, we'd say do $105 for the same night over on VRBO. So the renters just paid more, and so we were still having the same cash flow. That's how we would compare the two. And
there's a ton of really good content
Yeah.
to look into for advice about this stuff. I mean, a metric ton. There's stuff on
Yes.
Bigger Pockets.
Yes.
Check out Bigger Pockets for the people that do short-term rental. And lots of guys and gals on YouTube that talk about their processes. You'll get some really good advice in that way.
Right. And then VRBO has another option if you know you're going to be renting a lot. I've read some articles that say if you're going to be expecting to make about $10,000 or more a year, they have like what they call a subscription service, which has been about $4.99 at one time per year. So you want to look and see, is the per rental percentage better or the one-time subscription? Again, see what the current rate is when you're signing up or watching this video.
So communication is key with these platforms. Key.
Yeah.
For instance, if something were to get broken in your property, you need to open a ticket immediately. You need to be non-confrontational in your conversations with these platforms, or they'll just kind of cut you out of the program. So be aware of some of the pitfalls. And again, look online for advice about how to approach problems that you have. We didn't have any problems of any magnitude that required any of this.
Right.
So we can't offer a ton of advice other than to say your client will really appreciate clear communication.
Yes.
Lots of things in the home that explain how the home is going to function for them is vital. So we put together a little packet of information. I should say Pod put together the information so that they would have some idea of the community and how the house operated.
Yeah, it's had a nice bright red binder with those plastic sleeves, and put the main how-to documents in there. Things everybody wants to know how to operate. The coffee maker, the TV, the heating system, heating and cooling. Those are kind of the three big ones that everybody needs to know. And label makers can make things easier. You would label specific items in the house. Where does the trash can go?
Fire extinguisher, all that
Fire
stuff.
extinguisher, yes. Where does the remotes go? So they can remember where to put things back, and because you carry the remote off. Durango has put the remote in the refrigerator before. You take
I'll
the
do
remote.
that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another nice thing about the platforms is they give you a documented line of communication. You can follow back and see who you've talked to. Sometimes you'll get several renters going at once. You'll have the person you're currently talking to who's staying there, somebody who's going to be renting in several months, and somebody else who's looking at renting in 2 months. And so you'll be like, which one was that? And so you can just look on the app and see what the last message you had was, and it is all nicely laid out to help you manage quickly and easily. And maybe you're not communicating that often. Again, keeps you on track. Makes management simple. Really, people have full-time jobs and able to do this in between.
Yeah, if we can do it, anybody can. Put
Yeah.
it that way. And you can be pretty busy in your lifestyle,
Right.
and have time to manage these kind of platforms. So these are our thoughts about it. Maybe others have content about using Craigslist more specifically. I would have to say avoid Craigslist would be my knee-jerk reaction for all kinds of reasons.
Right.
But the main one is profitability and cash flow.
Yeah.
I mean, cash is king, and we make really good money in cash flow through these kind of services.
Right.
So there you go.
Security and having your personal information protected. Because when people are first looking at your property, they don't even have your direct information. They have your name, but not your phone number until they have booked your property, which is nice.
Yeah, they don't even know your specific address. They just know the area.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of protections in that way, where often with Craigslist, you're like, this is my address, this is the rent, come and check it out, and so on. So,
Right.
yep.
We appreciate VRBO, HomeAway, Airbnb, and Justin for giving us this topic. So if you've enjoyed this content, please let us know in the comments. Let us know what else we should be talking about.
give us a like. Be sure and subscribe. And if you don't like our content,
that means 2 thumbs down.
nice.
And also security and legal. And also security and what am I trying to say?
Legal monkeys. Security and legal monkeys are really important. You have an unlicensed monkey,
You don't want unlicensed
it
monkeys.
can just be ugly.